The monsoon. What should be a welcome sound is now dreaded in the Indian state of Madhya Pradesh. Hundreds of villages have been submerged in water as the government builds a series of massive dams along the sacred Narmada River. The project serves the dual purpose of diverting water to drought-prone regions in western Gujarat and proving India's industrial might to the world. If this project is allowed to see completion, over 1 million people will be displaced from their homes, many of them Adivasi, India's indigenous people. To the Adivasi, the Narmada Valley is more than just a place to live. The land gives them everything they need, and they treat it with respect. Their ancestors for at least 9 generations back have lived here, and it is said that their gods are in the landscape. The government of Gujarat has offered settlements of new land to the displaced families, but these new plots of land have poor soil and depend on fertilizers and pesticides, which cost money, something the Adivasi have never really had to worry about. In addition, the government does not have enough land for everyone, so the alternative is cash settlements. These settlements are insufficient, and most recipients end up in city slums. Unappeased, the Adivasi remain in their villages, even as the water rises. We will drown, they say, but we will not leave. They are practicing a form of resistance that Gandhi called satyagraha, a firm belief in the power of the truth that guides all of one's actions. As I watch these events unfold in the documentary Drowned Out, I have to ask myself, what would I die for? This tragedy in India has 2 main components. First, the sheer human injustice. People who have provided themselves with all they need for generations are now being forced from their homes. The second problem is that the majority of the human inhabitants of the world have forgotten that we are a part of nature. As history has unfolded, we have placed anthropocentric interests at the center and adopted a worldview based on domination. This idea is known as the nature-culture split, the idea that at some point humans saw themselves as separate from nature. People began to see the wild as something to be afraid of and to dominate. This change has several possible culprits, including the rise of monotheism, the scientific revolution, and, most recently, industrialization and the externalization of costs. Of course, not everyone has forgotten the connection between humans and nature. Aldo Leopold suggests we adopt a land ethic, or ecological conscience, in which we are forced to become aware of our individual responsibility for the health of the land. He goes on to say that we need to stop thinking about land use solely in terms of economics, that the land itself has intrinsic value. One person who embodied this notion was the late Larry Gibson, who refused millions of dollars for his land on a coal-rich mountain in West Virginia. For people who live in a process of unmediated exchange with nature, the fate of ecosystems in the area they inhabit is a question of truly vital importance. Any degradation of the natural spaces on which they depend for a living undermines their subsistence rights. One could argue from a utilitarian point of view in favor of the Narmada Dam project if the project was successful in its goals. Unfortunately, the people who are supposed to benefit from the dam don't because the water is diverted to an industrial belt before it reaches them. In this scenario, everyone loses. The Adivasi lose their land, people are still thirsty, and the destruction of the earth continues. This problem is not unique to India. All over the world, nature is being seriously harmed for the sake of mineral extraction, fossil fuels, lumber, and agriculture, to name just a few examples. All over the world, biodiversity is lost, and all over the world, it is largely the indigenous and otherwise marginalized populations who have to bear the consequences. The pursuit of wealth has skewed our values. If we are to avoid the catastrophic collapse of our civilizations and our planet, we need to find a way to reevaluate and revive our connection to the natural world. Some areas of modern thought offer a way to think about this connection. Deep ecology tells us that we need to become aware of the greater self that includes not just what we think of as the singular I, but all living things. This sounds similar to the ancient Hindu concept of Brahman, the great self and source of all life. In fact, many Hindu sects offered theocentric or embedded ecological worldviews that imagine the landscape itself as a deity. This is not unique to Hinduism, but is a recurring theme in mythology from all over the world. The Greeks, for instance, imagined the earth as the body of the goddess Gaia. It is Gaia who lends her name to a theory that combines modern science with a deep ecological worldview. James Lovelock, a NASA scientist searching for life on Mars in the 1960s, correctly predicted that Mars had no life, but he is more well known for his resulting theory of the Earth as a holistic, self-regulating system that evolves and adapts to create conditions favorable for life. Lovelock noticed patterns that suggested that the Earth itself functions like a living organism. These patterns include regulation of temperatures and atmospheric content. Since the formation of Earth, the sun's intensity has increased by 30%, but temperatures have remained relatively stable. This, Lovelock attributes to a decrease of atmospheric carbon dioxide, a greenhouse gas. That is, until very recently. Anthropogenic climate change is the undoing of ancient processes. The burning of fossil fuel is the release of CO2 that was taken from our atmosphere over the course of millions of years. At the same time, human economic activity is damaging the metaphoric lungs of the earth. the rainforests that have the potential to reabsorb some of the CO2. If Gaia is to be thought of as a living organism, her autoimmune responses are surely kicking in. Climate change, with its dramatic altering of landscapes and violent storms, is like a fever that is trying to drive out the pathogens, humans. In order to survive and perpetuate life, the Earth may need to kill us off. The only way we can prevent this is by recognizing our dependence on the Earth and working to protect its health. The story of the Narmada Dam project and the displaced Adivasi people offers a tragic anecdote about the human condition in these times. Even if the Adivasi can't be saved, we should recognize the moral of the story. If we maintain the current worldview of constant growth, consumption, and domination, it will not only be the marginalized people who find themselves drowned out, it will be all of us. One thing is clear. We need to adopt a new worldview. We need a world where harmony replaces domination, where our relationship with the earth is symbiotic, not parasitic. We need a world where all people have the right to a decent standard of living and humility, where women are not objectified, a world free of discrimination, where all life is treated with the utmost respect. A mass cultural shift of this nature seems rather daunting and unlikely, but it will be impossible unless all of us as individuals strive to create this new world in our own lives. We must stand against all forms of injustice, political, economic, or environmental injustice, as well as racism and sexism. Listen to your inner self to find out what that means for you. We must wake up!